creating custom Pokémon for you! Welcome back, everyone, to the show where we select lucky commenters to spin a series of random wheels that give us factors for a Pokémon that we then create just for you. It's gonna be a super fun episode today, y'all. We have 4 amazing custom Pokémon that I know you're gonna love. If you do end up enjoying today's video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. And if you want a custom Pokémon in the next episode, all you gotta do is leave a comment on this video letting me know that you want one, because for every episode, I just randomly select people from the comments. It's the most fair that way, everybody has an equal chance, but it also makes it even more important to subscribe with the notification bell turned on, because you could get a custom Pokemon and never even know it if you miss the episode, which would be an absolute tragedy. Don't let it happen to you, subscribe now. And without further ado, let's just get into it. And today's first Pokemon will be for Sketty Boy. I like that username. So alright, Sketty, let's start by getting the power level of your Pokemon, and you are going to be a fossil Pokemon. That's really cool. Now let's see how many times your fossil Pokemon can evolve, and you're going to get 0, which makes you a 1-stage fossil Pokemon, sort of like Aerodactyl. Now let's see what typing your Pokemon's going to be, besides of course the rock type, and it's going to be the bug type. That's super interesting. I think we have seen it before with Armaldo, but that's still very interesting typing, especially for a fossil. And the last step before we see which Pokemon looks like, let's see if it has an X Factor, and you do a Mega Evolution. That is absolutely awesome. When the Jurassic period of the Pokemon universe is discussed, you often only hear tales of its most large and intimidating creatures, such as Tyrantrum, Bastiodon, and Aerodactyl. But what if I told you the most interesting Pokemon this time period has to offer is also its smallest? Your Pokemon is Capso, the frail Pokemon. Now I know what you're thinking, the frail Pokemon? That's super harsh, and while yes it is super harsh, it's also super true. This was one of the weakest Pokemon of all time. In fact, this Pokemon was so weak that the fossil collected by scientists is originally from a Capso that just landed on some wet tree sap and was too weak to fly its way out of it. So when it was finally time to revive the Thorax fossil, everyone was expecting a small, weak insect Pokemon, but what they got was a very large surprise. Because somehow, Capso had weaponized the amber that was revived around it, now wearing it as some sort of giant armor. That's right, it turns out this Pokemon's true strength lied in how crafty it was, and now that it's piloting this giant amber golem, it's taken its title of the frail Pokemon from accurate to ironic. And the scientists must have agreed, because after they were so surprised with Capso's strength, they decided to go one step further and expose it to Mega Evolution energy, which took Capso and transformed it into the incredibly powerful Mega Capso. And now that it's upgraded its armor even further, utilizing other fossils, it's ready to take revenge on all those who used to call it weak. And that's gonna do it for today's first Pokemon. Overall, I love how this one turned out. It's super unique, and I've been meaning to do this idea for a while, where it's like a small thing piloting a large thing. I've just always thought that would be super cool, and it turned out exactly how I wanted. This one was drawn by Trainer Mats on Instagram, so make sure to go check him out. And for the shiny, we went with this cool green color to kind of look like slime, where the original version's amber. I thought that was a cool theme as well. But now let's get into the second Pokemon. And this Pokemon will be for William Plays. Glad you found us again. And of course, we'll start by getting the power level of your Pokemon, and you are going to be a regular Pokemon. Nothing wrong with that. Now let's see how many times your Pokemon can evolve. You can get 1, 2, 0, or the special split evolution, and you got 1, which makes you a 2-stage evolution line. Now let's see what typing your Pokemon's going to be. Your first type is going to be the Ice type. That's cool. That's one of my favorite types to make designs for. An Ice Dragon type. That's actually really cool. And the last step before we see which Pokemon looks like, let's see if it has an X Factor, and you do! Back-to-back X Factors. This one's an additional form. That's awesome. Of all the Pokemon that can be found in the frozen tundra, there's none quite like this one. Your Pokemon is Kai'Jite, the baby kaiju Pokemon. These Pokemon are actually omnivores, as they're known to eat small winter plants as well as Bergmite. And upon reaching level 65, it would evolve into Glacera. This Pokemon has a really cool inspiration that some of y'all might recognize because it's based off the kaiju Gamera. And if you don't know who Gamera is, is, it's basically a giant mutated turtle that was made around the Godzilla era to sort of capitalize off that popularity, and it's been in a bunch of movies over the years. And easily one of the most unique things about Glacera is its ability to fly around using its shell. And we absolutely had to incorporate that into this Pokemon's additional form, which is called its flight form. Despite its massive weight, in this form, Glacera is able to fly through the air at extreme speeds. In terms of gameplay, Glacera would enter this form before using any flying type move, and while in this form, it would gain all the benefits of being a flying type without actually being a flying type. This includes receiving the stab bonus on all flying type moves, as well as being immune to ground type attacks and spikes. And that's gonna do it for today's second Pokemon. Personally, I'm a really big fan of this one because I also used to be a really big fan of old kaiju movies, so Gamera, Godzilla, all that stuff was super cool to me. So again, I just find this one super charming. This one was drawn by The Neo on Instagram. Make sure to go check him out. And for the shiny, we went with this green color to sort of be a callback to real lizards and Godzilla and stuff like that. I thought that was a cool theme. But now let's get into the third Pokemon. And this one will be for Jake6164. Glad you're excited about the game, Jake. Hope it comes out soon enough. So alright, Jake, let's start by getting the power level of your Pokemon, and you are going to be regular. Still nothing wrong with that. Now let's see how many times your Pokemon can evolve, and it's looking like 1 again, so it's another 2-stage evolution line. Now let's see what typing your Pokemon's going to be. Your first type is the Cosmic type. That's awesome. That's our fan-made type if you didn't know, so that's Hype. And Cosmic Fighting type, that seems really unique. We haven't made that yet, so that's really cool. And the last step before we see which Pokemon looks like, let's see if it has an X Factor. None this time. If there's one thing I know about space, it's that there's a lot of floating rocks in it. And it seems like every other month I'm seeing some post on social media talking about the next giant asteroid that's supposed to collide with Earth, but it never happened. Your Pokemon is Orbox, and it's part of the reason why. Because these Pokemon train to improve their fighting abilities by trying to dodge floating space rocks, and they're usually not very successful. But the rocks that collide with Orbox don't collide with Earth, so that's good for us. When exposed to a moonstone, it would evolve into Clobbit. Fueled by the anger of constantly getting hit by space rocks in its pre-evolution, this Pokemon is known to go on absolute tears throughout the galaxy, even decimating entire asteroid fields. And that's gonna do it for today's third Pokemon. Again, I had a ton of fun with this one. The typing was definitely super cool to work with, and I've had this idea for a while that if we ever did get a Cosmic Fighting type to do something like a large spatial body with an orbiting moon around it, but instead of a moon, it's a fist that it would rotate around its body to attack. Always thought that would be a super cool idea, and this one turned out amazing. This one was also drawn by Devacia Art on Instagram, so make sure to go check them out. And for the shiny, we went with this darker tone to sort of look like the moon or just a bit scarier. I think it turned out amazing. But now let's get into the Patreon Pokemon. Okay, so this is actually a brand new thing that we're going to start doing at the end of every episode. I recently started a Patreon to support the channel, as well as the increase of artists that we've been commissioning for the episodes lately. And if you become a member, link in bio, you can get on this wheel that will start spinning at the end of every episode, and if it lands on you, the Pokemon is for you. So let's spin this wheel and see who the first ever Patreon Pokemon is dedicated to, and it is Ryan. But a big thank you to all 3 people for becoming the first Patreon members. Now let's make this Pokemon. Same as normal on the rest of the wheels, let's start by getting the power level of your Pokemon, and you are a Convergent Evolution. Interesting. Which means now we have to see what generation of Pokemon we're making a Convergent for, and it's Generation 4, that's Diamond and Pearl, one of my favorites. So now we'll spin this wheel that has every single Generation 4 Pokemon on it, and we got Carnivine. That's pretty interesting. I think most people would consider that a lame Pokemon, so we're gonna try to change that. Now let's see what new typing we'll be giving to Carnivine. Your first type is going to be the Steel type. That's interesting. I can see that working with the Venus Flytrap. And Steel Dragon type, that is really cool. I don't know how this is gonna work, but we're gonna make it work. And the last step before we see which Pokemon looks like, let's see if it has an X Factor, and you do, a new mechanic. We really have our work cut out for us on this Pokemon. Wish me luck. Red, yellow, green, purple. Purple! Your Pokemon is Carniverge, and it comes in 4 variations. When these Pokemon team up, they can face any foe, even legendary. Because even when the enemy transforms into a more powerful form, they can do the same. Because collecting all 4 forms of Carniverge will cause them to combine into their merged form. And in this state, they are nigh unstoppable. And that's gonna do it for today's 4th Pokemon. This one is absolutely insane, but it had to be. It's a Steel Dragon type regional Carnivine with an additional form. We had to go all out, and we certainly did. This one was drawn by Le Petit Art on Instagram, and again, this thing is absolutely insane. Probably the craziest thing of the entire series, but I hope you liked it. And that is it for today's episode. I hope y'all enjoyed. If you did, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe before you go. If you want to watch more episodes, you can check the playlist, and if you want to see me on any other social medias or check out the Patreon, all of those links are in the description. I really appreciate it, and I will see y'all in the next episode. Peace.